very brightly colored and it's very loud, and it's fun for a while.
We want to be free to do what we want to do.
Muhammad Ali and Sonny Barger, the president of Hell's Angels.
This is 1095.
Good morning, Ninette Hartley, Mum. Welcome to the podcast. How are you?
I'm good. Good morning, Matthew Rickard, son.
Good. Yeah, well, good afternoon here. See, I didn't know whether to jump in with Ninette Hartley or Mum, so I think both is probably best. So.
Yeah, well, I'm certainly both.
Cool. And where are you today?
I'm sitting in my study, which is just on the landing in our little cottage in Dorset, and the cottage is near Bridport on the coast, which is where I often sit. It's a very nice, I have my desk, it's a really nice area, so I have everything around me, and I look out at the farm opposite and watch the tractors going up and down. It's nice, it's good, and we've had some fantastic weather lately, but right now it's cloudy and damp, humid. We haven't actually had storms here, but there's been quite a lot of storms and rain in the country. So
cool,
yeah,
much
good.
like here. So I maybe give a little bit of an intro. Obviously, you're my mum, and that is why we're doing a podcast. But there's more to it than that. I'm gonna, I want to chat to you about writing and poetry, and the fact you're at uni, which is pretty incredible. All this kind of stuff. So maybe do you want to just give a bit of a broad kind of intro with what you do in your life, your interests and stuff like that, in terms of
I mean, I've always been interested in writing. I've done it from quite a young age, but nothing really serious. I've dabbled in a bit of poetry. I've written little stories, and I've written plays. Years ago, had a children's theatre company, and I used to write the plays for that. So I've always been a writer. But it was only really a few years ago. Well, actually, it was in 2011, which we'll probably talk about a little bit later. But I just started to write seriously, and I thought, oh, this is really good. I'm really enjoying this. It was a great outlet. It was a great way of getting out emotional things out and down on paper. And so that's how it sort of started, this thing of writing, and I got hooked. So I did courses online, and because we were living in Italy at the time, so I couldn't actually have any meetings with anybody. I did go to one place for a residential course. I just went for one day, but there were people there for a few days. And I just got more and more into it. And it was one of the reasons actually that we left Italy, because I found there wasn't anywhere there that I could really get into writing. Of course, today, in this, with coronavirus and all the Zoom things that are going on at this moment, it wouldn't actually make any difference. But I did come back, and we chose Bridport because Bridport has something called the Bridport Prize, which is quite a big literary prize and quite well known throughout the world. And we thought that there would probably be a lot going on here, and we were right. So I came back and I met lots of people, and I did poetry slams and short stories and flash fiction, and met quite a lot of, so I have writing buddies that we meet up, and it's really good. And then last year, did you expect me to talk this much?
No, it's good. It's good. You're saving me asking the question, so go for it.
Right. Well, last year, in about, I think it must have been March, April time, we went over to Dublin, and we went into Trinity College, which is a wonderful university there in Dublin, where Oscar Wilde went. Well, loads of people went to Trinity, all the famous writers from Ireland. And I just said, oh, I really wish I'd had the opportunity to go to university. And Jeff said, well, why don't you do an MA? And I thought, oh, really? That's a good idea. Yeah, maybe I will. So I looked, and I applied to go to Trinity, Dublin, actually, to do an MA in creative writing. And they took ages to come back, and then they said I was on a waiting list. And I thought, oh, there could be, and they didn't say you're number 3 on the waiting list or anything. So I thought it could be thousands. So I looked around, and I saw Bath and Exeter, which are quite close to here. And I applied to both of those as well. And Exeter gave me an unconditional offer to go and do an MA in creative writing. And I liked all the modules. And so that was it. And off I went back to uni, and it's been brilliant for my writing. It's been really good. I've met a lot of great people, terrific tutors, people of different ages, and they're all interested in writing. That's the best thing about it, which I suppose. Go on, sorry.
No, that's all right. I want to ask you about. I'm going to ask a lot about writing, but I want to ask you about uni because it's not. Well, maybe I don't know, but how common is it for, you know, how to say this correctly, but older people to go to university? I mean, it's, you know, is there anyone? Are you the oldest in the class? Are there other people there doing degrees that are older? Is it a mixture? What is uni like these days?
Well, yeah, it's a mixture. I think. Well, I'm pretty sure I was the oldest on the creative writing course this year, but there was somebody who was just a couple of years younger than me. And then there's quite a lot of people in their 50s, in their 40s, and a few in their 20s. Not that many people go straight from uni, from doing their bachelor's into doing an MA. I think people go away and think about it a bit. But there's a whole, I mean, it's pretty diverse.
Yeah.
I was asked to do a short interview with a young girl that I made friends with who was in her late 20s. And we did a little interview for Exeter University together, showing that the diversity and the fact that you could be friends with somebody that was a lot older or a lot younger than you. The thing that we had in common were our DMs, actually, our red DM.
I know you like your Dr. Martens, of course. I used to wear a pair. I used to wear a pair when I was, I think, 16 all the time. Red DMs as well. But yeah, I know you like your red Dr. Martens.
I do. I've got red ones, blue ones, gold ones now. I'm getting a little collection.
Awesome. So with the disruption of this year and COVID, how's that affected? Were you doing a distance degree anyway, so it's made no difference? Or have you now shifted into a virtual model, whereas you weren't doing that before?
Yeah, we've shifted into virtual. I was going to Exeter twice a week for seminars and lectures. And I think they just closed down just before the whole place closed down. They began to start to, you know, say we should probably be prepared to go home. But it was only the last 2 or 3 lectures, 2 weeks that we had. And they just did it on another kind of virtual thing, Teams, I think it's called. And then anyway, for me, at the end of that term, which was after Easter, I would have only had to go in 3 or 4 times anyway, because I've been doing my dissertation, and mainly that's you work on your own and you have one-to-ones with your tutor. So you have a supervisor and you're allocated 3 sessions with them. So I've had my 3 sessions online with my supervisor, the lovely Simon Rennie. I better mention him because
cool.
He's great. He's a poet, and I like him very much. He's a very good, enthusiastic member of the staff at Exeter. He's from Manchester.
With what is it about writing? I also love writing. You know, we've shared a lot more recently, I think, over the recent years, and my interest is much more in the script character side of writing. But you know, I know you like writing, you like poetry, and which there's difference in poetry versus like you're writing a novel as well. What is it about writing that you love? What is the attraction to it? Do you lose yourself in it? Do you find yourself in it? What is it, the love of writing?
Do you know, it's really difficult to pinpoint what it actually is. I suppose I just like creating a world, and I like telling stories. So, I mean, I have completed a novel, which is the first draft of a novel, but I don't like it any. I do like the story, but I don't like the way I've written it. So that's going to be completely revamped at some point and rewritten in a much better way, I hope. And I like writing memoir. I like writing about my experiences in life, because I've had a pretty diverse life. You know, I've been married 3 times, and I've been widowed and divorced, and it's, you know, and I've done a lot of things. I've lived in a lot of different places. I've had many different careers, but the writing has been constant. I've always been doing some sort of writing at some point. So yeah, I don't know. It's very hard to pinpoint. With poetry, I love the way that you can have an idea about a poem, and you start to write it. A poem takes on a life of its own, really. You start with an idea, and then you're writing, and it just goes off sometimes into something else. But it's the language with poetry, and I find I'm not very good at punctuation. Okay, I have a big problem with punctuation, but I'm getting better at that. And recently I've been cutting most of the punctuation out or doing something else so I don't do it actually wrong. But so much can be said in a poem. So much is behind the words. You know, if you read a poem over and over again, you start to, you find different things in it, or different, and it's all about the rhythm. And I do enjoy poetry, but I enjoy all types of writing, but I don't know really why.
It's interesting because I really enjoy writing poetry, although I don't think I really understand what it is. Like, as you know, I've written some stuff usually in emotional times, and, you know, for things like funerals and stuff like that. But I'm not really taking it on as some kind of poet. I'm just simply using it as an opportunity to tell something through rhyme, which creates a nice kind of, you know, rhythm to a story. But there's a lot more to poetry than that, right? I mean, you obviously, you're studying this side of, you're studying poetry as part of your course, I assume, are you? Or?
I'm actually doing poetry for my dissertation, so that's
Okay.
you know, the biggest piece of work. It's worth 60 points or whatever on the MA. So I've had to write 600 lines of poetry, which is quite a lot. I mean, I think it's 27 poems in my case, and then I have to write an essay to go alongside it. And my choice of theme for my poetry is dance. So dance and poetry, because I was obviously a dance teacher for a long time, a ballet teacher and a dance teacher for over 25 years. So I just decided that I would write poetry influenced by dance or inspired by dance. And then I started, as I started to write about it, I started to think about how much work went into being a dancer. When you're, you watch a performance on stage and it's just over very quickly, or even if it's a couple of hours, whatever it is, it's done, and you don't really go away and think, gosh, you know, all that work they did to get up there on that stage. You do a little bit, and then I began to think the same thing about poetry. You just read a poem and you've read it, and you don't think about how long that poem has taken to get to the page, and how much editing is done, and how much thinking about it, and it's very interesting. So that's actually what my essay is about, is comparing the two things, comparing the dancer and the poet, I suppose, and how
That's
they get
very interesting. And what is the, I mean, I cannot even, I mean, I can understand what you're saying, but I haven't got the experience with poetry. But when you go into, I've got experience with writing, and I know the kind of thinking and preparation side of that, and the agony, which is kind of, there's a love and an agony that go together with writing, right? But yeah, when it comes to poetry, is it the same approach when you prepare and when you write, and then obviously editing is does someone else edit, or you edit yourself? Because poetry is quite different to
Yeah.
traditional editing of a book or something.
Well, it's very interesting because I went to a talk at the university when we were still attending things, and that was a question that I put to them, because I never thought about the fact that poetry was edited. So if you send a book in and you get a publisher, usually they have an in-house editor, or you have an editor, and they edit the book and they give you line edits and structural edits and everything else. It never occurred to me that the same thing happened with poetry. Well, it does, but I've realized now, because that was the answer to the question. Yes, you send, you know, if your poetry is published, somebody edits it before it actually gets published. But you can obviously, the same as with a book, you can say, I don't want you to change that, I want it to stay like that's how I want it. But for me, the interesting development of poetry has been that I can write something, and you put it away and you get it out and you look at it, and I've discussed it with my tutor or with a colleague, another person, and said, what do you think of this? And as you learn, you sort of begin to see where you can make it better or how you can change it. And sometimes it's quite simple things, you know, like how does it look on the page? Is it all over the place? Should it be, you know, tighter? You can tighten it up. You can get rid of lots of words in poetry that you don't need quite easily. And one thing is to try not to end your poems, end your lines on and or but, or, you know, you need to move it. It's quite complicated. I'll have to send you a couple of poems, Matt.
Yeah, please do, and I will share them as part of this so other people can read your poetry. So yeah, no, it's good. It's good to know. And I don't, yeah, like I say, I'm no expert in poetry. I just, for my own kind of love of it, it's writing rhymes, which I don't even know that there is something some level of poetry in that, but I think it's very different to when people broadly talk about poetry. So,
well, I think people don't necessarily expect poems to rhyme today. You don't. And they have this thing called near rhyme, or, you know, where it doesn't actually rhyme, but it almost does, just like the sound of the word is a little bit like it.
that's very much like song. I mean, actually, song
Yeah.
lyrics are very much like that as well. They're kind of structured, I think, in the same way.
Yeah, it's all about rhythm and meaning, and also I don't personally like poetry that's too obscure, because I can't see the point. But you want your reader to have to do a little bit of work to look a bit deeper into, you know, roses are red, violets are blue. But you need to give them a bit more than that, so they just do a little bit of work. Because what's nice is when somebody says to you, oh, do you know, I love that poem, and I had to keep reading it, and I put it away, but I just wanted to go back and have another look. You know, it's when somebody wants to keep reading it, you know, you're getting better, you're doing the right thing.
Yeah.
Unlike
Cool.
a book. Go on, sorry.
I wanted to ask you about the book as well. You mentioned it very briefly there, and we haven't chatted about it for ages, but it's always stuck in my head, because I think the story, if I remember rightly, that you were writing, which is not a true story, but it was about, it's based around the Second World War, right? And England and a factory and someone from Europe. And
well,
I just found the story really interesting, but I don't know where you're at with it. We haven't chatted probably for over a year on it.
Well, I've written it. I've written the whole thing, but I don't like it, because my protagonist in the story, she just isn't. She's a bit too shallow. I need to give her a lot more. I need to give the whole thing a lot more. But I still think that the actual the elevator pitch, as you would know, is what, you know. If I tell you that the story is basically about a girl working in the factory during the Second World War, in the shirt factory, and they began to make shirts for the forces, and she decides to put her name and address in the pocket of one of the shirts that's going out to the Navy, and then the story goes from there. So it's quite an interesting concept. I think it will make a good story. Well, I think it does make a good story. It's just whether I can write it well enough.
Well, I definitely like the elevator pitch. So, but yeah, well, it's not unlike a writer not to like their writing. Anyway, that's the other thing. So that means you're definitely a proper writer. So,
oh right, okay.
I think that goes with the territory.
Right. So that's that. But I've also started writing a memoir, which I know you've read. So that's in 2011. We lost Tosh, who was your brother and my son, obviously, and I began to write about it. And I had written about it right from day one, so I'd made all the notes. And that, I realise now, which it's nearly 10 years later, was the best thing I could have done, because I just did it and put it away. So when I wrote this time, when I started to write it properly and really think about it, and I did it as part of a module that I was doing at university, I didn't feel that it was, you know, cathartic or depressing. I wasn't getting it all off my chest, because I'd already done that. So I think it really improved my writing, the fact that I could stand back from it and look at it objectively. And also, I actually felt like I was spending time with him, so I quite enjoyed it. I quite enjoyed chatting to him, because I've written it in the form of a letter to him about everything that happened and what's happened afterwards. So I really want to finish that now, because I've done, you know, only the beginning. I've done 5,000 words or something, 6,000 words, but I've got plenty more words.
So I read it. I mean, let's just take a step back. I suppose it'd be good to, if you're happy to talk about this, because I think it's really interesting. And obviously, if anyone is listening to this, they will be confused what we're going on about. But I read that. It was incredibly difficult to read, and I was like bawling with tears when I read it. I mean, but at the same time, I could understand the healing in it. Do you want to maybe just broadly explain the situation and what happened? So it's 2011, right? Obviously, I lost a brother.
Yeah, 2011. It was January, and Tosh, or Thomas, Tosh, everybody knows him as Tosh. So he had a hobby of graffiti. So he was a graffiti artist, and he went over to Portugal to do some painting. And for some reason, I mean, I have got to make a few inquiries about things, but he decided to climb up on a roof to have a look on the other side, where he thought there was a railway line or somewhere where they might be able to do some painting. And he fell through a skylight onto the ground, and basically he died pretty much instantly, we were told. So, but there was a lot go around all that. So the whole family had to go there. We had to deal with a foreign language, and the fact that they wanted his organ donators were there immediately saying we'd like the organs. So there was an awful lot to go through. Everything in a foreign country. Then we had to deal with the cremation, and then we came back to England, all of us, and we had I think it was a wonderful ceremony of celebration for him in Bristol, and eventually that's where his ashes have ended up. And he was a great lad. He's only 27. So I remember you saying right at the beginning, you've got to celebrate the life he had and not think about what he hasn't had. But it's quite difficult to do that often, because even today I'm always thinking, oh, Tosh would love that, oh, what a pity he's missed that, and oh, shame he's not here for that. So you do that with anybody that's passed, I think.
Yeah.
But yes, it's interesting, and I hope that when I eventually finish it, people will read it and get something from it, especially as I discovered that there are many parents in my position. There were, and there still are, every day.
I always remember you sharing a really powerful story with me. It must have been a couple of years after Tosh died. There were a couple of things that really stuck out. That, for me, obviously I lost a brother, right? So, but I, at the same time, I don't think you can compare grief, but at the same time, I think there is a big difference in a mother losing a child as opposed to, losing a brother or sister. It's a different thing. And I, trying to empathize with it was challenging because I don't have kids either. So I didn't, I think I have a level of empathy to a degree, but I probably don't really understand. But there were things you said to me that were hugely powerful that I did understand, like I remember the first day after it being a year, how that kind of changed the kind of grief in the memory process, whereby, everything that happened in that first year, you could always remember back to the year before when he was alive. Whereas once you went past 1 year, the memory of a year before was after he'd passed away. I remember you saying that. It was very interesting to understand how you were dealing with the grief. And the other thing that you said, which was really stuck with me, was when I think you went to a support group, or you spoke to some people or something, and you suddenly realized, okay, it's a tragic story, but there are much more tragic stories. And you told me the story of this father, I think, that had lost kids in a fire or something, or I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was really brave of you to take that on and realize, yeah, your grief was obviously there and genuine, but to understand terrible stories everywhere and how much worse, there's always a worse story, right? I mean, that's how I understood it. Yeah, that's the things that stuck with me that I remember.
Yeah, I think you can't really use the word lucky, but I feel and still do, I feel terrible for anybody who has lost their only child. They have nothing else, and he had siblings, so we had a family unit that we could all grieve together. But you're right about it's different for a parent, different for a mother. And I think it's a grief that never really goes away. You just learn to live with it. That's what you do. You learn to live with it. And other people do not understand that. And when they say things like, oh, I do, that's terrible. Yes, my grandfather died last week, and and you think, no, it's not the same, because that's kind of the right order of things, Yeah. Losing your parents, losing your grandparents, that's kind of how it should be. But you do not really expect your children to go before you. But also it brings in, I always think about all those parents, all those mums, the First World War, the Second World War. The First World War must have been terrible, because people lost about 3 or 4 brothers in one day. I mean, I can't imagine what it must be like. And yes, I think it's a great philosophy. I think it's one of my ways of thinking, one of my philosophies, if you like, that I always think that there's somebody worse off than me whenever I'm feeling a bit fed up about stuff. I think there's so many people. I am so lucky in so many ways.
I think I think it's just, I suppose it's the same as being grateful in a different, the flip side is you're grateful for other things rather than dwelling on the things that that are not so great. So you just jog my memory and say, oh yeah, just to agree with you, on the Second World War or the First World War. And it was the same, I mean, very different, but I went to, when I visited the tsunami orphanage in Thailand, whenever that was, probably 15 years ago. I just had the same insight, you know, when you suddenly realize I was surrounded by kids who had so much kind of hope and, you know, they'd all lost their parents. And, you know, that for me in a very different way just struck me and still is with me now when if I ever complain about things or I think about those kids and I'm just like, you know, what am I complaining about?
Yeah.
So,
It's always easy to look around you and say, oh, gosh, look at them, you know, aren't I lucky? I've got this and I've got that. And it's not always material things, you know, it's just, I'm touch wood, I'm very lucky with my health at the moment. So, and I know there's, you know, a few of my friends of my age are not so lucky. They are suffering with various things. I mean, I get the odd ache, you know, get a bit stiff in the mornings now when I get up. But I can still write. That's the main thing. And I can write by hand still, and it's great.
maybe a good
Sorry.
no, that's right. Maybe a good segue to, I wanted to ask you just when you got me thinking then when you talked about the war and, you know, you've had a really interesting life, different, you know, you've been in different class systems, you've been in different places, all sorts. We won't cover it all today, but, you know, when you look at the world today, I mean, this year in particularly, but just in general, and that there seems to be this sense in the world, the US more so, you know, this kind of, the younger generations coming through, there is this, you would almost think we live in the worst world ever sometimes when you read the news. And, you know, I often think, you know, imagine if you had Facebook during the Second World War, you know, or social media in general, how bad the world would look. And I think maybe social media is the problem, not the world. But I'd love to get your perspective, you know, when you look at how things are today, and then when you think of, you know, you know, what you would have lived through and you know, your mum and your dad and what they would have lived through. So your memories of their stories, you know, how do you see the past versus today, where we're at, you know, how things are going?
Well, I think it's strange because we were just talking about it. I mean, I'm lucky because I've lived in the time where there have been no world wars, but there have been plenty of wars going on during my lifetime, but not directly affecting me. I mean, the biggest one, I suppose, would have been the Falklands and Iraq, but I think it's always been the same. And I agree with you. I think social media, and not just social media, but the media as well, there's just so much, I hate to use the term fake news because it's true that it happens everywhere. But, you know, my mother was born in 1913. So just before the First World War. And I think maybe her parents would have thought, oh my, you know, what have we brought this child into? This terrible war, everybody's dying. And, you know, and then my mother was the Second World War. She brought my brother in 1939. So he was right at the beginning of the Second World War. And I didn't speak to her. This is the other thing, which is I regret not speaking to my mum enough and getting enough information from her. There are so many questions I would like answered now.
Yeah.
And, you know, my dad, I was 13 when my dad was killed in a car accident, so I barely know him at all. I'd love to know more. In those days, you know, I guess a 13-year-old child today would know a lot more about their parents than a 13-year-old child in the 50s and early 60s, because we weren't on the same level. We didn't share things in the same way that kids today seem to. That's making me feel really old talking like this. But I can't imagine. I guess social media the world does feel a terrible place at the moment. I actually said that this morning. I woke up this morning and I thought, I felt a bit depressed when I woke up this morning, and I just thought it's because I just feel that the world is it's just every day there's just not very good news about anything.
I think there's two parts to this, actually. I realize I'm asking you a question and, you know, I wasn't really asking based on right now in this year, because actually we are in the weirdest year, certainly in my life. And I don't know how you feel about it in your life, but it's a freaking weird year. I think I was just thinking more in the kind of modern age of, you know, there seems to be this constant, you know, things are terrible. And that's been going on for a while, I feel. And I always think, well, actually, and statistically, if you look at it, life is getting better. You know, people are getting less poor. You know, there are less people starving. There are plenty of statistics to drive a better story. But you're right. Yeah, I think when you look at this year, and maybe we should talk about that. I mean, this is I don't know what's going on this year, but yeah, what's your general sentiment on 2020?
Well, I don't think I can get too political about it. I mean, I think that the coronavirus, to me, it seems, which is what you're talking about, I guess, and Trump.
Yeah.
I don't know, just so much going on at the minute, isn't there?
Yeah.
I'm not very happy with our government at all. I don't think they've handled things properly. I can't see the point in quarantine restrictions now, when best time would have been to do it would have been back in February or the beginning of March. They never bothered then. So why are they doing it now? They've made a complete mess of the A-level results, and they're probably going to make a mess of the GCSE results or whatever. I don't know if you know that yet.
I've seen it. It's funny enough, I've seen mates who got kids posting about it, and then I keep seeing all this social media. I haven't read the actual news about it, so, but clearly something's gone wrong.
It's basically that they, instead of, I personally think they should have just relied on the teachers' predicted grades, what they felt that their students were going to get. And the government basically have kind of not trusted that. So they've done some kind of algorithm on, I can't explain it exactly, but it depends what the school got last year. What were their grades in the school last year? You know, how well did the children do last year? Well, the consequence of that is that, you know, they've got kids in a school that doesn't do very well being marked down for their grades, even though that particular child has done very well. So, you know, a good example is where they were predicted an A star, an A and a B, and they've got a C and a D or something. I mean, it's madness. And some people have even been given a U, which is unclassified, which you normally just get if you don't turn up for the exam, or well, they couldn't turn up for the exam because they didn't have any.
I can tell you what it is. You actually get an A, Mum, because I do remember that my only A was in Latin, and it was an A for absent because I was around Rich Forster's house, I think, watching Apocalypse Now and drinking whiskey. So yeah, it's an A for absent, which is the only A I got in my GCSEs. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was a U, but I always said it was an A. But
what a way. Do you regret wasting some of that time or not really? Let's turn the tables, eh?
At school, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't know. I've wasted a lot more time since, I think, in other ways. But no, I don't. I mean, I was completely confused at school, and I still quite passionate. I think, you know, everything in life, when you look back, for me, whatever's happening at one point in time kind of drives your opinions and your behavior later on. And, you know, I'm really still quite opinionated and maybe passionate's the right word, in terms of how education just needs to be overhauled, because I come out of school feeling like I was completely stupid. Like, that's how I felt. The only thing I understood that I was good at really was playing rugby, but I just felt, I don't know whether it was age or situation or whatever, but I found it very hard to concentrate. And I still do, but now it's an asset rather than a hindrance. And I think this is probably common with, you know, lots of people who work in entrepreneurial fields. They, you know, when it comes to academic situations. So I don't have any kind of regret. I would not have wanting to. I don't think I was really set for A-levels and university. I mean, I when I think back at that time, I'm more proud that I kind of was able to go out of school, write letters, get a job in a recording studio at 16.
Yeah.
Leave home and feel kind of grown up. I wasn't grown up at all, obviously, but you know. But no, I don't.
There's been a few interesting photos floating about recently on the family biz.
We won't put those on the podcast.
The hair and
I did think I was Robert Smith, so who is still around. I mean, he still has crazy hair, and he must be in his 60s, I think. But
he's got to be in his 60s.
Yeah. So no regrets really. Yeah. What was it like? Probably was more regrettable for you guys. I think, trying to deal with a 16-year-old crazy kid. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I think we felt. I know that this is not what we're going to talk about, but I think we both, your stepfather and I, felt all the time that we would do what we thought was best for you. But sometimes parents don't really know, do they? That's the thing. You think you're doing the right thing, especially as far as education is concerned, but we possibly didn't. But I hope you're over it by now anyway.
Oh, yeah, no, of course. No, I mean, I still, the funny thing is, when I think of my time at that, you know, when I went to Bedford School for a few years, the connections that made in my life have been invaluable and special on a friendship level. And I'm still, you know, really connected to some really good mates from school. And then the other side of that is just, like I said, just the good connections that have been productive as well. I did a podcast with Andy Gummersall the other week, who's an England rugby player. You know, I got that because we happened to go to school for a couple of years together, or he was, you know, a few years below me. But so, you know, I don't regret that time, but yeah, I mean, it just was what it was, and I wasn't academically focused. So yeah.
It's very hard though. I think you can't, I mean, I was the same. I wasn't academically focused, and I am now, but it's awfully late
Well,
for me.
I
It's come
probably am
through
as
now.
well. I'm heading the same direction, I think. So
I think it's a shame that we, you know, that we can't, well, you can't put an old head on young shoulders, but I feel that I've still got so much that I want to learn. It's not that I feel I've got so much to learn, but there's so much that I want. I'm interested now, you know, I'm like a sponge, but whereas when I was sort of 14, 15, I was dreadful, really
I think,
terrible.
yeah, but also I think there's, for me, certainly, you know, being in a situation where you're being told what to do, that doesn't help me either. And maybe some people are like that. Whereas when you're making your own decisions, you know, to learn something, you're going to be a lot more,
Yeah, I think
a
you
lot
might
more
have got
driven about that if you've decided to do it, you know, which is
yeah,
what you're doing now,
absolutely.
right? You've decided to go to uni in your later years. You're in charge of that process, and yeah, you know, that's why it's working, I suppose.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I was like you. I didn't like being told things. I can remember when I was quite young being told to read a certain book, and I never wanted to read a book that I was told to read. And yet, you know, I would have picked up another book and read quite happily. So yeah, I don't like being told.
You brought up your brother earlier. I really want to ask, obviously, about Tony, and there's your 15 minutes of fame that kind of kicked in as well because of your brother, which I can like interject. I was in a wine bar the other day in town here, and we played your song on so it wasn't Spotify, but one of the streaming apps. So you'd be good to know that your song is out there and people can listen to it anywhere, and I will pop it into the podcast. But what was
Okay.
that? You're what, 10, 15 years younger than Tony?
I'm 12. I think 12 years younger than him.
So 12 years younger, but I don't remember, but I'm assuming when you were young, he was, you know, he was very much in the public eye, very famous. Well, I mean, it may have meant nothing, but is it, you know, what was did it have any impact on your younger life, just his kind of exposure to fame at that when you were a kid, and, you know, were you kind of involved in any of it? Obviously that song you wrote, but.
Well, I wasn't really involved that much in it. I mean, I knew my brother was famous, I suppose, but he wasn't famous by today's standards. It's a whole different, you know, there wasn't that celeb culture in those days, but he was really well known, and I was proud of him. But at the end of the day, he was just my brother at home. He was an annoying brother. You know, he was 12 years older than me. I think I could have been quite a good pianist if it hadn't been for him, because he was so good at the piano. I remember one day I was practicing Clementi, which is like piano exercises, you know, da 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 da, and I wasn't very good at it. And he just leant over the top and played it really quickly, and I wanted to shut the lid on his fingers, and I just thought, oh, I didn't have a vocabulary of swear words then, but you know, I just was so fed up with him. And I think I remember throwing a wet flannel at him once because it was so annoying, and I got into trouble for it. I couldn't understand that at all. But anyway, so yeah, basically he was just my brother, but he was well known. He was well known for a couple of reasons. He did work through his call up, you know, because in those days he had to do the call up, and he went to the Coldstream Guards, but he still managed somehow to work. Writing and arranging music. I don't know how he did it, but it meant he was earning money. And there was a big article in the Daily Mail, and the headline said 10,000 a year guardsman Tony Hatch. And of course, this was 10,000 a year was a lot of money. We're back in 1961 or something. That was a lot of money a year. And the other thing was when he went on to New Faces, and he was the one that everybody loved to hate, like Simon Cowell, you know. Yep. So he was well known then, and people knew about him. I don't know why I ended up making that record. I think my mother probably thought I should. So she probably asked him, and he probably did it just to keep her happy. But it was fun.
I was listening to it the other day, but it was funny actually listening to the lyrics, because they almost sound like relevant lyrics in 2020, right? So
yeah,
I mean, I will play it on here. It was called Push a Little Button. But what was just talk about you know, what you were 16, right, when you wrote it. What was your thinking behind the lyrics when you
I
wrote
was
it?
15. It was 1966 when I was 15 when I did it, because I wasn't 16 till the end of the year. And it was a little protest song. That's what it was.
Yeah.
So you know, it basically is, you can push a button to do this, 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 and this, but one man can push one little button and we're all gone. And of course, yes, it's relevant today, especially as the particular man at the moment who's got his finger on the button is slightly unpredictable. So yeah, it was. And I remember I've written a short story about it, actually, because I remember the experience of making the actual record. I absolutely loved doing it. It was in the studio. I just felt so cool. I'd got these like cans on my head, as they call them, you know, and I did all the singing, but my brother kept trying to make me sing. You know, I was a bit of a Barbara Streisand fan. I wanted to sing out, you know, I wanted to be there on the stage and everything. He was like, no, just, you know, keep it calm. I forget who he told me to sing like, but I think it was Marianne Faithfull or something. Or just sing it quieter. So he kept bringing my voice down till it was just a kind of young person singing, whereas I had aspirations of being in some musical or other. But yeah, the whole experience of making that was brilliant. I absolutely loved it, and I was only 15. And I went on the television as well twice, and a big car came to pick me up from school, I remember one day. Oh, I thought I was the bee's knees.
That would have been exciting. Is the video the actual video for it? Was it shot for the song, or is it just someone?
No, that was some random person that picked it up and put it to that. So that's not me. No, there is no video. I'm sure there is somewhere in the BBC archives.
It works really well. Whoever put it with this kind of video, I'll put it either on the beginning or the end of this podcast, just so people know what on earth we are talking about. So
it does work well, and I had loads of sort of comments and things about it, but it's definitely, and it's not me either on the video dancing around. I did do a lot of dancing as a child. That's the other thing. A lot of dancing, a lot of pony riding. I mean, really, I had a very good childhood. My mother thoroughly spoilt me because I was the youngest. I could do no wrong. She always wanted a little girl with blonde hair and blue eyes, and I was the third one.
This is actually, I wanted to ask you about this. Actually, this is, again, it's probably kind of links in quite well. And I've never asked you this, but so when you were, in terms of what were you considered as a family? You know, with your father, like as in working class, middle class. What you were brought up in a working class family, or?
I never even thought about it. My mother was definitely working class. My mother was born in one room in Deptford and had 5 brothers and sisters, or either one brother and 3 sisters. So there were 5 of them. And her father was a butcher. And my father, I don't know an awful lot about, but I think he was more middle class because I have delved a little bit into it. I discovered that our ancestors were actually people who I've forgotten the word, castrators, that's it. But they castrated animals, don't worry.
Okay.
But that was years ago, so I don't know my father. But we lived in Ruislip. We had our own house. I guess we were middle class, probably.
Maybe it's not interesting. I think maybe it's me that's found it more interesting. I think over it, just having been away from the UK for a long time, and then having been brought up in very different class systems. You know, going from council flats to nice houses, and you know, I've become very kind of aware of the class system because of that. And I've got friends that are from all different walks of life, and I really notice it in the UK. I don't know if it's changed now. I mean, I've been away 25 years, but in terms of my upbringing, I really notice it. You know, going from comprehensive to private to, you know, back to here and there. So yeah, I mean, maybe it's more about me. I was going to ask you about it and how you've, you know, the differences you've seen and how that's kind of coloured your character.
I think it hasn't changed at all. I think we do still have this dreadful, which is part of the problem that's arisen today. You know, the poor people in the working class areas, and you have this north-south divide all the time. Well, it's all kind of reared its ugly head with the A-level results, because you know, it's in the south, and all the private and public schools have all got great results, and it's terrible. It is terrible. But I wouldn't have thought about the class system when I was young. It wouldn't have occurred to me. It's not something we really thought about. Maybe because we weren't upper class and we weren't lower class. Because we were
I honestly think, and I might be wrong, but I think the 80s had a big impact on it, because I think this whole yuppie era that kind of grew out of the 80s and the kind of Thatcher years, I think created more probably of an apparent class system. It had always been there in a different way, like it exists in Indian culture, but I think it was more like that before, and not. Whereas I think it became much more of a clear division. And I really experienced it, like having mates from, I remember getting, when I went to private school, and then getting beaten up on the train, and weird stuff, like. So I really noticed it, like the kind of, and I just wonder whether the 80s had some sort of influence on it, when you had this kind of a lot of wealth, fast wealth, and the kind of yuppie era and all that kind of thing. Might be wrong, but
no, I mean, because it depends what you think class is. If class is just having money, that is a whole different thing, isn't it? So for me, I don't think I felt inadequate. I don't want to go into this too much, but I felt slightly inadequate when I married your dad, because they were a sort of step up, but I learnt a lot from it. I mean, Granny was wonderful. Granny wore Jaeger clothes and drank dry martini, and I hadn't heard of either of those until I met Granny. And I did say recently that poor Granny's just passed away, by the way.
Yeah, bless her. Yeah, cheers.
Bless her. But she taught me a lot. But whether or not I needed to learn that, I don't know. But your dad definitely felt he was a class better than me.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
That's a whole other story. Exactly.
Yeah. Cool. Hey, look, we're we're kind of drawing close to the end, but I've got some kind of interesting quickfire questions, unless there was anything that I haven't asked, though. I don't know if there's anything I haven't asked that. Yeah, just
Do I press the buzzer? Or can I say pass?
No, you can just answer or refuse to answer, but they're not, just something that will give people insight into your characters. Three things you would take. The three things you would have to take. You can only take three things to a desert island. What are they?
A notepad and pencil, or an endless supply of paper and pencils, I suppose.
Yep.
The other thing I'd have to have is a thesaurus, or a thesaurus, however you pronounce it.
Yep.
Because I find my brain today I can't remember the words, so I need to be looking some words up. And I think, I don't know, the third thing, what would I take? You put me on the spot here. There must be something. Can I have a clue? Would I be bothered? Would I be bothered about drinking or eating? That you just.
Some of those things, they're gone very quickly, right? So yeah.
Yeah, exactly. No, I can't. I don't know what the third one would be. I'd have to think about that and let you know.
Cool. Something that you have not yet done that you really want to do in your life. Could be anything. Could be, because I know you've done a lot. I mean, you're now going to uni, and is there something? What? And there might be a list of things, I don't know, and you can say more than one, but something you haven't yet done that you really want to do.
I would really, really like to be in a movie. I'd love to be in a film, but I don't think there's too many parts for people of my age.
Well, actually, firstly, I'm obviously biased because of my mother, but you do have those kind of Judi Dench qualities.
I have to wait for her to pass on, won't I?
But also, what do you mean people of your age? I mean, that's the whole thing. I mean, every movie has people of every age. So I think you should 100% go for it.
All right, I'll go for that then. Is there anything else? I think that is the biggest thing, really. And I obviously would like to I'd like to have a book published at some point. A poetry book, poetry book and a poetry book, a novel and a memoir. There you go. Those are the three things.
Cool. And kind of similar but different, but what a memorable event in your life, maybe the most memorable. I mean, obviously, we talked about Tosh, and that's memorable in a certain way. I suppose it doesn't have to have a positive spin, but I think when I wrote that question, it was more, what's one of the kind of best memories you have when you look back over your life?
Well, I've got a lot. I have a lot of lovely memories, but I suppose what comes to mind straight away when you say that is it's not really an event, but the move to Italy, the experience of living in Italy was great for a period of time. Unfortunately, I think losing Tosh was part of the reason I wanted to come back to England after that as well. But that first, the experience of learning Italian, meeting the Italians, living in a country place in Italy. It was a great experience, and I'm really, really glad that I was given the opportunity to do it. It was terrific. But
Cool.
for an event, I can't think of a one-off event.
Well, it doesn't have to be a one-off event. I mean, that's fine. It's funny, actually. We were watching it's good that we've captured a lot of that stuff on video. We were watching the kind of family, like, silly video of Italy, and it's amazing. It was such a beautiful place you lived in, and I've got some great memories of that time. So, and finally, another, a time or when you felt really free in life, or maybe just generally, when you look at freedom in life and you look back, what makes you feel free as a human being when you look on your life?
Well, funny you should say that, because just recently I did a little poetry event that we did, social distancing in a local cider place, but we had to go in the barn because it was raining. And one of the things we did was to think about a barn or something, and it reminded me of when I was 17. I went to work on a farm in Devon, and I've never forgotten that feeling of being able to walk out of the farmhouse. Remember, I was brought up in Ruislip in Middlesex, so it was all main road cars. I wasn't a city girl, but I wasn't a country girl. And I just remember being able to walk just out of the house and down. There was a sort of the roads of the farm, just mud paths and things and driveways. And there was a barn on the left-hand side. It was a huge barn and it had hay in it. And I went and sat in there. And I think I had a book. And I felt fantastic. I thought, this is wonderful. I'm on my own. I don't mind my own company. I'm reading. I think it was probably a lovely sunny day or something as well. But that was something that has stayed with me, that memory of that feeling of freedom, of being away from everybody. So yeah, I think that's what I like. So I love the countryside.
That's a great story. And I remember that place. I'm sure you took us there.
We did. I did. Yeah, I did. Yeah.
Yeah, the dog's going off in the background, so excuse the background noise. But,
that to me is freedom, that being able to just wander off, which I can do here to a certain extent. I mean, it's quite busy, the road, I don't know if you can hear it. But I can walk off into the fields and find a little place to sit, or I love that. And of course I had that in Italy as well.
It's what I have here. It's exactly what I have here and why I love it. So it's really, really cool. And yeah, great story to end the chat. So thank you for... It's been cool. Thanks for taking the time to jump on the podcast and catch up. It was good to do a podcast with your mother. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think we've only covered about a third of, probably a quarter what we could talk about.
There was a lot of other stuff. We could have talked about the Bourneville years and all that stuff. But...
Yeah, we could. Well, that sounds like a series in a book series.
The Bourneville years. Cool. All right, Mum. Well, I'll leave you to your day in the Dorset Hills. So.
All right. Thank you.
And lovely to catch up, and we'll speak again soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.
It's very brightly colored and it's very loud, and it's fun for a while.
This is 109.5.
Button and you get hot chocolate. Push a little button and you get some tea. The world's gone mad just pushing little buttons, but what about you and me? You push a little button and you make a motor car. Push a little button and you watch TV. Night and day we're pushing little buttons, but what about you and me? Fully automatic and it saves you time. Someday soon we'll all be very rich, earning our money with a master switch. You push a little button and it's all done for you, easier than saying ABC. The world's gone mad just pushing little buttons, but what about you and me? Automatic and it saves you time. Someday soon we'll all be very rich, earning our money with a master switch. 'Cause one little man can push one little button.